Hello, everyone, and welcome to MLAS 800 Artificial Intelligence System Architecture lecture is what we're going to be covering today. We're going to be focused on operationalization or extending our architecture and building out components that we haven't built to date. So this will be this week will be part lecture as well as part lab. So let's go ahead and jump into the lecture for today. To kick this week off, we've got the artificial intelligence system architecture overview. Then we'll jump into operationalization and then extending the architecture. And then I'm going to wrap up with a little bit of discussion around the components around that extension that we haven't built into or walked into rather. So we'll dive a little bit into those two parts specifically. So first up, artificial intelligence system architecture. So let's take a step up, really go kind of macro, high level, and we'll talk about the major components of what it is that we've been doing, or rather what an AI system encapsulates. And then this will be a little bit of a recap because we've built some of these elements to date. So the first is training data. We work with training data to build the large language model, and then i.e. the computational engine that runs what it is that we've been working with. We've also built out the interaction prompts. So we went through a lab to build out those prompts, and that gives us an ability to run interactively with our autonomous system, and we've built that using Google Colab. So let me rephrase that, re-say that rather, Google Colab. And so we've been building that out on the training data, the LLM, and the interaction. We haven't been doing so much on the training data itself. We've been working with it, but we haven't been doing a lot of data modeling. It's just that is its own area, and so just to kind of put a little bit of a caveat on that, we haven't been doing any data engineering on the training data piece because I want to focus on the large language model. But for all intents and purposes of what it is that we are building, those are the three main buckets that we've built out. So it's something to just kind of keep in mind. But what we have not built out up to this point is the interface, the application programming interface, as well as the JSON, JavaScript object notation format, the integration layer. So we've built a really basic interaction prompt, but we haven't built a proper interface API yet. And so we'll explore that in a development environment. It won't be in a dev environment again because we haven't been. We're keeping this on the cheap, and not spinning up large servers and incurring any subscription costs from that perspective. We're just kind of keeping it on the low cost side of things. Okay, so that's what our architecture looks like from a high level: training data, large language model, interaction layer, interface layer, and an integration layer. Now, diving down at a little bit lower level, when we go, what are we trying to do here is we're trying to operationalize the model. So remember, this is MLAS 800, and so this is integrated machine learning and autonomous systems, and an autonomous system has to have some form of operationalization. So that's a common running undercurrent of a theme for us in this course. And so we have to have some form of an operationalization mindset. We're not in the weeds on the theory of the algebra and the linear algebra that's used to create the action potentials that work out as it relates to the large language models that we're working with at a really basic level. That's just not what we're doing in this course. You could certainly go look that up and learn about that on your own, but we're definitely working at an applied level, and not so much in the theory of what a neural network, how a neural network behaves at a mathematical level or anything like that. So we're focused on the operationalization of all of these big moving parts, right? System level. So to do that, we go through the process of getting our data model in place, right? Which is the labeling, validation, ingestion, We haven't talked so much on the feature engineering piece of it, but that's all the stuff that goes into that training data. So this bucket that we have here on the prior slide, the very first thing, that's really kind of getting into the details on this next slide here, the labeling, validation, ingestion, and engineering, feature engineering. And then, of course, we get into the model training, and then there's a process of going through the evaluation and then getting that all baked out and ready for the large language model to go through its iteration to build out what we call a quantized version of itself. And then from there, we get into the infrastructure piece. So these pieces on the right, the monitoring, inference, infrastructure, and demonstration, right? The actual application. That's where we get into the actual operationalization of what it is that we're talking about from a theme perspective of the course. So how do we, let's just jump into what are we going to be doing? So using the first diagram we've got, so we've built the training data, LLM, and the interaction, but we haven't done the interface layer and we haven't done the integration layer. So those two last little pieces, that's what we're going to be focused on this week. If you looked at the syllabus and reviewed that, you'll notice that we've gone through the prompt design, prompt engineering, prompting techniques, and we've gone through a lot of those pieces, but we haven't covered the API and interface and integration parts of it. So that's what we're going to be doing this week. So let's talk about the two missing parts, and then we'll jump on over into the lab and work on building out these two missing parts of our architecture. So the first one is the interface. I mentioned the acronym, the application programming interface. And then I also mentioned the JavaScript object notation. And I've got a little mistake here. It's JavaScript. There we go. Make that misspelled. Fix that misspelled part of the word here, and that's fixed. Perfect. Script. So integration JavaScript, the integration layer is JavaScript object notation, or JSON. And this is pretty familiar with people in the software engineering world. If you've done some software development, this is all going to sound really, really familiar. If you haven't, that's okay. We're not trying to make you application programming, API engineering, interface developer experts. We're not trying to get into that. Although you could certainly go that route and just focus on building APIs and do well. But again, that's kind of going off into a different area, as it were with this course. So the API and JSON pieces that we're going to be building out are going to be our focus for the lab. So what is an API? Architecturally, I've got a server. The API is that middle connective tissue between the server and the client. This is kind of using some I would say some older school language. You might have heard like client server technology or client server. It's really back from the 90s. And you kind of still hear it permeate from an architectural perspective because it is so easy to kind of visualize from a system design perspective what that is. API sits in the middle of a server and a client, and just think of it as you've got it's almost like a publisher subscriber model. I have a publisher, think of like a newspaper, and that publisher is the server, and it has content. Well, people as in clients, subscribe to that publisher. To do that at mass scale, when we're talking about subscribing to data and at a really micro, almost molecular level, so to speak, you have to create what's called APIs. And so I have a server, and then I create an API, and then that facilitates the request, the push-pull between the publisher and the subscriber. I get a request response. It's what we'd call a publisher subscriber model, or a client server architecture. all are applicable when it comes to APIs. Now, when you build an API, you have to have a format. So you can't just build an API and then things just magically work. You have to instantiate a data standard so that the client and the server know exactly what language they're speaking. And the data communication has to be instantiated at a very, very, very precise level. So when you formulate, for example, a person's name, you have to be very specific. Like, okay, how long is the name? What is it? The first name, middle name, last name, or is it just the whole name? Um, what type of character system are you using for the name? These are all important. Am I including a phone number or a social security number, or which I shouldn't be doing from a security perspective, or an employee ID number? It just whatever it is, a JSON format instantiates the communication protocol. It standardizes the communication between the server and the client. And so it's the data standardization. So when we say JSON, that's what we're talking about. Okay. So if you have any questions about any of that, feel free to, of course, hit me up in text or email. And I think everyone's been doing really well up to this point. So really appreciate it. Appreciate all the hard work. And I think that's all I've got for this lecture this week. So let me go ahead and say for next steps, we're going to go head on over to the lab. We're going to use Google Colab. And then from there, what we'll do is we'll start building out those missing parts. Okay, that's all I've got, and we'll see you in the lab.